International Media TV. Television that listens to you.
Hi, I'm Johnnie Burrell. Welcome to the program.
Well, once again, I want to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon and making the effort to be here on this busy holiday weekend. Somehow once heard I said that it was Independence Day. Somebody said tomorrow. Is that right? I want to thank my colleagues at the African American Center here at the San Francisco Public Library, in particular Katrina Bruton, who has been so supportive of the programs that I've been organizing here. I've been organizing programs here for the last 14 years, previously with Stuart Shaw, and this is the second program in collaboration this year between the Before Columbus Foundation and the African American Center here at the San Francisco Public Library. So again, I want to extend my thanks Before Columbus and the African American Center here. As the United States enters its 16th year of the longest war in U.S. history, a war that, according to the Congressional Budget Office, requires $174 million per day, with over 65 million displaced human beings across the face of the earth as a result of these wars and their continuing spread across the continents of Africa, Asia, Europe, Latin America. I can hardly think of a more salient issue, particularly on the precipice of July 4th, than the use or misuse of images of African Americans in the popular culture, which is largely what we were going to be speaking about today. Ishmael Reed, towering figure and presence in international arts and letters, has taken the great courageous step, along with Hakeem Madboudi of Third World Press, to bring together a group of intellectuals, artists, and writers in Black Hollywood Unchained. We have the honor of the presence of a number of those writers and contributors today, including the poet, playwright, essayist, and activist Marvin X, also one of the founding members of the Black Arts Movement, Halifu Osumare, educator, choreographer, dancer, and recently Professor Emeritus of the University of California, and Jesse Douglas Allen Taylor, activist, journalist, and also myself, Justin Desmangles, chair of the Before Columbus Foundation and contributor to this anthology as well. We don't have too much time, but I will give a very brief outline of today's program. As we do expect this conversation to get very heated, because fortunately for us, and certainly more fortunate for you as the audience, we don't all entirely agree, and that's best that way. And we expect a Q&A session to begin in the last half hour, in which we welcome your questions for our audience and for our distinguished panelists. So, we can begin there. They gave us these. All right. Up. Oh, okay. Gave us these fancy ones, huh? Get my Screen Actors Guild card next. Right. So, as a means of beginning this conversation, I'd like to bring us to the introductory paragraph of the essay that I contributed to this anthology, Tarantino's Plantation, because I think it will open up the discussion in ways that are fertile and allow us to follow our own intuitions about what we would like to share about our own writings and about this subject now. White fantasies of black flesh have fueled American commerce now for centuries. The phantoms are still very much with us, forming the axis around which not only the business of politics and art revolve, but the very weights and measures used once to buy and sell slaves are now employed to calculate the value of culture. The humiliation of blacks has always been a key element in American popular entertainment, dating before the Declaration of Independence. Lynchings were often a family affair attended by children as well as elders, with the rites often carrying on into the wee hours, souvenirs of body parts, etc. Historically, artists have proved a far more venal group in America than even politicians, and none find their profession as close to that of prostitution as that of actors and actresses. In fact, it can be said, and has been quite often, that Hollywood is one big whorehouse. If this is true, then the role of director is not unlike that of procurer. He or she pimps the product with all the wiles of a Madison Avenue magician, tricking the customer as to its value. So I'd like to begin by addressing a question to you, Jesse, and then invite all of our panelists to respond. In your essay contributing to this book, you talk about the dangers of a kind of presentism in which a character is introduced whose values and modes of expression in a ostensibly historical context are actually ones of the 21st century. In particular, you direct this attention to the character Django in Django Unchained, where we have a presumably historical figure, yet in fact, as the story unfolds, we discover that really this is someone taken from the present day. So looking at those contrasts, what are the dangers and what is delayed in our understanding of history by introducing a character with that kind of conflation?
Well, I think it's first thing is it's disrespectful to the people who actually lived in those times, because what happens is essentially Django is a boy from the block. I mean, he's like, we had in Oakland about a week or so ago where some fellows were shooting dice in downtown Oakland, and they got in an argument over a dice game. It sounded like a Stagger Lee song. And they pulled out their guns and they had a running gun battle in downtown Oakland in the middle of the day. And they shot and killed a 16-year-old young woman who had been at a funeral. And so the thing is that I think that in Django, what you do is you say, I think what Quentin Tarantino did was he said, we can't go back and do anything about slavery, and we so much want to. I mean, we dearly want to, but there's nothing that we can do. So it's almost like a dream. Let's take these really violent, vicious people who have been created by slavery, and let's punish the slave masters by sending one of them back. And that's essentially what's done. I mean, the Django in the movie could never have existed during that time. I mean, the idea that you could go on a plantation in Mississippi and shoot down two white people and then have somebody say, oh, well, we had a warrant for his arrest. Oh, okay, well, just get off the plantation. I mean, you couldn't do that today, much less Mississippi in the 1860s. So it gives a way of history that never could have happened. and it's sort of common now. I mean, what we want to do is rewrite history by saying, if we were back there then, this is what we would do. And most of us are not doing the things that we could do now, but we live in our dreams to say, well, if we were back there, no, we really would have done and cleaned that up. But again, it's a disrespect to the people who had to live within those historical times. I mean, for us, slavery always ended. Slavery ends in 1865. It always ends in 1865. And so, but for the people who lived during that time, they had no idea that it ever was going to end. They didn't have the benefit of our history behind them. So I think the disrespect is that it doesn't portray what people actually did and how people rebelled and what they did to rebel in those times. And you know, I think Ishmael talks about in the beginning of his essay, just the constant rebellion. And it wasn't just armed rebellion, it was sabotage. It was the work slowdown, and that's where the whole concept of a lazy nigger came from. You know, that these niggas are lazy because they're not working for free. And so this was just constant, the poisoning of animals. I mean, you know, the kind of things that went on. And so it's disrespectful to take somebody from our time and put them in a time that they never could have existed.
Halifu, do you want to respond?
Well, I think that there also is some groundwork to be laid about the book in general in relationship to Django Unchained, because Ishmael first approached many of us to respond as a rejoinder to Quentin Tarantino's 2012 film, because it caused a lot of dialogue and controversy. And so many of us wrote essays just on that movie. That's why you asked that question and you begin to respond based on that particular film. And then the book was supposed to come out within a year of the film, and obviously it did not, as many publications don't. And so then it became, instead of Django Unchained, Black Hollywood Unchained. So there's a whole group of essays just on issues around blacks in Hollywood, and then I think, is it part one, which is the essays just on that particular film, which I'm a part of. So I just think that the audience needs to know that right up front, that there are essays on Hollywood in general and blacks' stereotypic roles in the films, and then there's a lot of essays just on that film as a kind of prototype of what's wrong with Hollywood today. So I just wanted to mention that. In my essay, I quote Jelani Cobb, who's a well-known historian who appears on TV a lot, and he talks about the movie being a riff on the mythology we've mistaken for history. And that's the approach that I took, that most of our history in general is oftentimes mythologized. And Hollywood definitely is a myth-making machine. So it's going to take the way in which we take history and mythologize it to a whole other level. And that's what Tarantino did, especially focusing on, to riff off of what you were just saying, taking the idea of the superhero being the savior, which is a part of the American individualism ethos, that it's always the individual that is the savior, not the collective, not the group. And so part of the disrespect is the fact that Tarantino doesn't give the people themselves that collectively rebelled in so many different ways against that institution of slavery enough credit, and everything is put into the character of Django as the savior of the system.
Marvin, I'd like to pivot away just slightly from the point that Halifu is making here, and
Get too far.
and direct our attention to something very much at the center of your contribution. And it touches on a very advanced theoretical point that is made by Frantz Fanon tirelessly through his work, and it has to do with the psychological malady of the oppressed person and the possibility of, I'm not sure whose migraine is that me?
I think when you rub against
Is that what it is? And the psychological malady of the oppressed person that potentially can be cured, you might say, through an act of revolutionary violence. This idea, which appears in The Wretched of the Earth and later A Dying Colonialism from Frantz Fanon, was conceived in the midst of the Algerian War, but it is very much at the center of your contribution. Could you speak to that in terms of this individualism that Halifu is talking about?
Well, I spoke about that in my essay in terms of Django freeing his woman, as opposed to freeing the community. And as Douglas said earlier, there was resistance every day of our, and my friend Ed Howard taught me to use the term American slave system, as opposed to being a slave. We are Africans caught in the American slave system. And so I refer people to the best documentary I've seen on TV about this subject. It's on the History Channel, and it's called Slave Catchers and Slave Resistors. Has anyone seen that? Slave catchers and slave resistors. And so they show the slave catcher, but then they show the resistance that went on every day, the burning of plantations, to the point where the insurance company wouldn't even insure the plantations, and the sabotage, and every kind of form of resistance, the Maroons going off into their own independent community. So all of this was done, and Dr. Hare, of course, today talks about those of us who suffer white supremacy. And he says white people have white supremacy type 1, and we have type 2. So we're suffering type 2 white supremacy. And I can bring it down to this present moment. I talked to my daughter this morning in Houston, and she's working on a project dealing with the Emancipation Park down there. And so she was telling me, we were speaking about Jesse Williams' speech on BET, which is all part of this so conveniently. And she was talking about, I may have said white people were reacting to his speech. She said, no, Dad, the black people were the ones that was really having a problem with his speech. I said, well, they're the white people. They're the other white people. Yeah, the blacks are the other white people, as the sister taught me. So the point is, and Sunrise uses the term mythology for history. He said, history, that's their story. Mythology is my story. So he turns myth into a positive, as opposed to the Hollywood world of make-believe. You understand? So what else can Hollywood do but perpetuate the world of make-believe? They're part of the whole system of oppression that causes us to be, I say, it ain't no post-traumatic stress. We're still in stress. It's traumatic stress syndrome. So we haven't healed. We never had any therapy upon emancipation. Who did we go to? We had doctors. And who certified those doctors? Anyway, down to the present moment, the doctor only can do what? He's certified to heal you within the system. He ain't gonna heal you to revolt. He ain't gonna heal you to free yourself. He's gonna heal you so you can adopt to what's going on and not be a mad, crazy Negro. right? And Baraka, talks about that in The Dutchman, about what did he say? If Bessie Smith had killed some white people, she wouldn't have needed the blues.
Right.
She could have talked very straight and plain about the world, and on and on. I'll stop there.
Ishmael, thus far in the conversation, there's been a very high contrast has been drawn between the articulation of history vis-a-vis popular culture and Hollywood, a contrast between what Albert Murray described as fake lore and actual black folklore. Indeed, over the last few decades, you've been one of the most prescient analysts of how popular culture has been used to create a societal condition in the United States in which police violence in particular can be inflicted upon blacks with impunity. But beyond that social level, also legal violence or extra-legal violence in the form of corruption within the banking system and so forth and so on. How do you place the work of Quentin Tarantino in that larger frame of the use of propaganda to create a condition in which violence against blacks is considered normal or permissible?
Well, first of all, is my mic on? The homicide rate among blacks at a low level until the government introduced trafficking. It looks like a V if you look at it. Prior to around the early 1990s when this was happening, the homicide rate was like that. With the introduction of crack, it rose. Nobody makes that connection. You're not going to get that in the corporate media because they will be alienating the people who buy their products. So it's not just the result where blacks are killing each other. It's a result of the underground economy. And when capitalism is not regulated, you get competition over markets, which explains World War II in the Pacific. The Japanese thought that they would be welcome into the European community. They decided to compete for markets. The Europeans resisted. They put an oil embargo on Japan. They had about 3 months worth of oil left. Japanese retaliated. So that's what's happening in our communities. Because I live there. I know what I'm talking about. I have to tell my family to keep shopping because there's a shootout on the block. So I actually live there. I'm not talking about the inner city from Princeton or Harvard or Calvin 10th. You understand? So this is a result of, it's easy to blame the victim. But this is a complex thing. Like in Oakland, there's a Marshall Plan that's going the other way. Remember these people in the Urban League talked about a Marshall Plan? We already got a Marshall Plan, but it's going the other way. Hundreds of millions of dollars are taken out of the inner city by minority groups. They're the ones who run the hotels. They're the ones who run the liquor store. They're the ones who bring in the cocaine and crack. I see this. I see people delivering the stuff. They're not black. I see them delivering them in my neighborhood. So all of this is a result of people being left out of legitimate capitalism. And there's been a tendency, or there's been a conspiracy, to suppress the assets of blacks, even after they were assets themselves. You understand? We can go into that, talk about the Freedom Bank. Read about the Freedom Bank, where black people put $1 billion, these are former slaves,
That's right.
into a bank. The government guaranteed this bank, the deposits. It was run by missionaries. They didn't know what they were doing. So the bank failed. They made Frederick Douglass the president. Frederick Douglass the president of the bank, and they blamed it on him. So blacks start off with their relationship with the capitalist system by losing $1 billion, all their assets. Okay, now, the importance of this book is that it was published by a black press. They may not have any money, but they published this book, okay? And this book has been cited in the mainstream as a rebuttal to Quentin Tarantino, and he had to answer. He had to answer me in Esquire magazine. The book was an example of dissent in the Los Angeles Times. This book, published by a black press, He said we are criticizing him because we want to make money. These people,
And we definitely have gotten rich off of this book.
That's what I said. I see these people are, a lot of these people are successful academics. You know, $100 is not going to make any difference in their
I'm waiting on my $100.
Well, but the point is,
I got you, though.
is that we can still talk back. We can still use a primitive medium to talk back. So he did answer. Now, it's hard to keep up with this stuff. I just want to make one point about something that's premiering in a couple of weeks. I've been in a back and forth with David Simon of The Wire. I call him a black pathology entrepreneur. He's been making a racket out of recycling stereotypes about blacks. Now, a lot of black people, they love The Wire. And we have an essay, as Halifu said that there are other essays in here about other things. We have an essay by a Cherokee scholar. We have an essay by Alejandro Mugia, a Hispanic scholar. So we have people who bear witness, because in our country, the line about blacks is that we are not experiencing what we are experiencing. We are not experiencing what we are experiencing, which is what Jeffrey Toobin on CNN says about us. They use him to his ideas about the OJ case to do two big spectaculars that'll make a lot of money. He said black people cannot come to the cannot grasp reality. That's his line about this decision in the OJ case. So we brought in a Native American scholar, Gary Hobson. We brought in Alejandro Mugia to be our witnesses, to back us up, because they always dismiss us as being paranoid, especially me. So we have other people to make the same kind of testimony. Gary Hobson said that when he was a kid going to the movies, he rooted for the Cowboys.
Yes.
I have a book by a Jewish survivor of Nazi Germany. Everybody should read this book, because that's what's happening to black people now. It's called When Time Ran Out. When Time Ran Out. About what happened in everyday life as the government became more and more right-wing. Like people's friends refused to associate with them. Like little subtle things. He said that when he was a kid and went to the movies, he rooted for the Germans. He rooted for the Aryans. So it's quite natural that a lot of blacks will like Django Unchained, The Wire, which is like the images of blacks that they have in the Nazi media. Now people say, we shouldn't go there. Well, Abraham Foxman said that Donald Trump reminds him of the Nazi rally. So I can go there. Abraham Foxman of the Anti-Defamation League, he said that Trump's rallies reminds him of those in Nazi Germany. Okay? So I can go there to say that there's no difference between the images of blacks in the media and those of minorities. And I say minorities because they had anti-black cartoons and things in the Nazi media, as well as Jewish people, gays, okay? So that's where we tip off. So now, David Simon said he can't enjoy his money, because of me, because of my criticism. He's made a fortune out of peddling or prostituting black people. He got a new project. Watch out. This thing is, he got a thing called The Night Of, written by one of the Wire writers, Richard Price. I confronted him at Aix-en-Provence about his participating in The Wire, because the guy started off being a good writer, and then he became a hack. He's made so much money off black people, he moved to Harlem, okay? He got a new project where black people, he's grafted some of the hoodlums, which is what people tune in for. He grafted some of the hoodlums from the Wire onto a new thing about Pakistani Americans. Okay, it's called The Night Of. Now, the Pakistanis are anti-black, and the blacks are anti-Muslim. Even the middle class one, like this police lady, make cracks about Pakistani Americans. For example, in one scene, this black policewoman, because they always put in good blacks so they can market the bad ones. You understand? That's the fake. That's the fake that they do. The head fake. They put some good blacks in there so they can market the bad ones. So she calls this Pakistani American Cheek and Chong. So I say, well, damn. I said, not only are we hoodlums, according to Richard Price, but we are the ones who are anti-Muslim, anti-Pakistani American. So I don't see any blacks are there any blacks around who are calling for Muslims to be barred from entering the country? So not only are we homophobic, but now we're anti-Muslim. So this is a problem with these projects. A lot of people see these projects as entertainment. But if you really probe these things and examine them, and I think this book is contemporary because Django Unchained is still contemporary. They're still showing that thing. It's probably got bigger audiences now than before because it's on Netflix in these places.
That's right.
And just like people say, were you still mad at The Color Purple? The Color Purple is a musical now. As a matter of fact, Paul Mooney said he expected A Color Purple on ice. So they keep putting that thing in, and we keep criticizing it. This is a problem I have with Django Unchained. It has become canonized history. Henry Louis Gates and them, the intellectual entrepreneur. I just left Toronto.
Yes.
The Caribbean people up there protested Showboat. The producers brought Henry Louis Gates up there to cool it out.
Well, Ishmael.
I just want to finish one thing. Django Unchained has become canonized black history by the Library of Congress. It's being taught in the African American Studies Department at Harvard. Instead of Blossomgame, instead of Gerald Horne, instead of Benjamin Quarles, instead of Annette Gordon Reed, Nell Payne, all our historians, this is the message, or this is the black history that's being taught. Now, this is another shock. So is The Wire is being taught at universities. It's being taught at the University of California, Berkeley. It's being taught at Harvard. So this stuff is not just entertainment. This is pure out-and-out propaganda.
Halifu, you.
Well, I definitely hear what you're talking about, but I do think that there are elements of some of these films, the television show The Wire, which I heard David D. was, on your interview the other day, felt like he enjoyed The Wire, and now he felt like since you have brought out all these issues that are problematic about it, now he can't enjoy it anymore. My point here is that I think that there are elements of some of these films that obviously are playing into the systematic oppression of people, but there are also elements that we can glean that do have some kind of messages that are also positive. And to me, the text here, the main thing that is important about it is as talking back to the system. We always have to have a mechanism to talk back to the system. Even though there can be both positive and negative images that are being portrayed to us, we must be able to critically think about what we're being bombarded with, and we must have a mechanism to be able to talk back to those images. And so this is the importance of this. We don't all have to agree on all the issues that each one of us see in these films, but we do have to have a mechanism to air our grievances and to talk back to the system. If we don't, then we're really lost, and we don't have a way, especially of the younger generation, of getting them to critically think. As a professor in a university, I'm always telling my students, you don't have to agree with me. You know, I have a point of view, and I'm going to definitely let you know what it is. But I expect you to critically think and come up with your own perspectives on the popular culture that you're being bombarded with, and then engage me in a dialogue and be able to back it up. That's the main thing.
Can I comment on your statement? Miri Baraka used to say, whenever they do something, whenever they say something, we have the intellectual capacity to shoot it down immediately. And so this is what this book represents. Shoot the fake BS down. We got the brains. Some of us. So let's do it. That's our job. They say one thing, shoot it down, because it's a lie. Dr. Harris said everything they say is fiction. He calls it the the fictive theory. Everything they say is fiction unless proven to be a fact. And when it come out, let's shoot it down, just like we're doing with this publication.
There was oh, please.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on something that Halifu said about, and this is not necessarily something positive, but, you know, in the South they have a saying, even the devil can quote scripture. So, you know, people say, well, you don't throw out the Bible simply because, you know, you heard the devil quoting it. So there are some things in these movies which we can take, we can look at and take. And I wouldn't call this one a positive, but last night in preparation for this event, I decided to watch Django Unchained again. And I got 45 minutes in and I couldn't finish it. I had to stop. And maybe not for the reasons, I know some people are kind of smiling, not for the reasons you're thinking. There are two scenes in the beginning when they go on the plantation in the first plantation in Mississippi. And one of them is the scene where Django whips one of the overseers from the old plantation. And then and Tarantino intersperses this with the whipping of Hilda. And I had to stop. I mean, I couldn't, and I was able to sit through it when I first saw it, you know, a couple of years ago, and I had to stop. And I thought again how in popular culture the violence of slavery is sanitized. And you know, for all the bad things Tarantino did in that movie, he did have some scenes in there which showed raw slavery. You know, the dogs eating the African American man, the fighters, which was common, you know, where they had the black fighters who just literally beat each other to death. And I think the thing is that I could think of only a couple of times that I've seen movies that showed that kind of violence, but never showed it directly. The ones I thought about were the scene in Beloved, the killing of the child, the slitting of her, the slitting of her throat. And actually that looks at slavery in a mirror. What happens, the mother who kills her child to keep her from being a slave is actually, you're not looking at slavery directly. You're looking in a mirror and seeing this is what it was, but it's so fierce, it's so terrible, we can't look at it directly. And the other scene was the whipping scene in Glory, and I'm a fan of Denzel Washington, and I think that is his single most important moment in screen history, and when you see him trying to hold up under this beating and retain his manhood and fight back the pain, and eventually it comes down in tears in his eyes. And again, this you see again not looking directly at slavery, but the mirror image of slavery. And I think that's a lesson that we can take in the work that we do. Slavery is the creation of African Americans. Before slavery, there was no such thing as African Americans. We did not exist. And in fact, Africa as we know it did not exist. There was not a continent in this world where people looked at themselves and say, who are we? Well, we're Africans. I mean, they saw themselves as members of tribal groups or communities or as individual nations, but Africans did not look at one continent and say, this is all of us. And so in order to, and African Americans, we're a mystery to ourselves. The things that we do, we look at each other and go, why do we do that? We can't figure out why we do that. And the answers to that are in slavery, because all of that was created in slavery. And so the thing is, I think that we have to look back and see beyond that mystery, which we have not done as a people, is to look back and see what was slavery. It's not what we've been told it was.
Yeah, but there are a lot of first-hand narratives that are superior to Tarantino's.
Oh, no, I agree.
Like the slave narrative.
Oh, no, I agree.
Frederick
Well,
Douglass.
except that the slave narratives were slaves who were living in slave country in North Carolina, Alabama, and Mississippi.
No, they're one of the best slave narratives was compiled in Canada in 1856.
Well, okay, well,
where fugitives could say things they couldn't say down here.
Okay, yeah, that's okay. Those.
Not only where there's a prohibition against writing among blacks, but I read this morning there's a prohibition against the slaves of Cherokee writing. So
Yeah.
a black person with a pen and pencil was a threat. You know, like from David Walker's time all the way down.
Oh yeah, no, those I trust, but I'm talking
But
about.
black men became the oppressors.
But I'm talking about the ones where the white WPA workers came down and they asked.
I'm talking
yeah.
about something by Benjamin Drew.
Okay, no, I understand. Yeah. But the point is, those are the things we need to be looking
Well,
at.
our critic called that stuff that Jesse talking about torture porn. There's a perverted audience that get off with this stuff.
Absolutely.
Seeing blacks being flagellated and all this kind of stuff.
That's
and I think
exactly
that's
right.
probably what his intention was. I followed the advertising. First they wanted to get black markets, so they, as a matter of fact, I cut it all out. They pushed Samuel Jackson. Not Samuel Jackson, but who's the guy that played Django?
Jamie Foxx.
What was it?
Jamie Foxx.
Yeah, this guy. He played it. I get them all mixed up. I said Samuel Jackson played himself. You know.
Nigger.
Oh yeah, he played himself. But and then what's his name? Leonardo DiCaprio emerged as the big ad. Come on, because then they want to get them all audience, the crossover audience. The point I wanted to bring this up is that all these black actors on the campaign trail for Hillary Clinton and for Bernie and all the rest of them, they should go back to Hollywood and reform Hollywood. Hollywood is still one of the most Jim Crow institutions in the United States. They just put some blacks on the board of governors of the Oscars,
Right.
which explains a lot.
That's right.
Well, I want to bring up another actor in the film, and that was Kerry Washington in her role as Hildy. She was the one who Jamie Foxx's character Django was going to save, right? And here's another part of the fantasy of Hollywood that actually in that particular film, a lot of black women enjoyed and appreciated, and I'm going to tell you why. Because in an interview that Tarantino did for TV One, a black television station, he says, "I think it's about time we had a black hero who saves a black woman." And so I wanted to really follow that line, and I remember how I felt personally when, at the end of the movie, Django actually goes into that room and saves her from her fate of being raped by the white plantation owner that was played by
DiCaprio?
Yeah, DiCaprio. And they get on the horse that they're going to ride away from the plantation together. Now, what was important for me is that she wasn't on the horse with him, holding on to him on the same horse. She had her own horse. Get my drift? They both rode off as equals as he blew up the plantation. I know that's all fantasy, but black women to see that there was a black man who actually, for once in the movie, saves the black woman. He doesn't die, and they go off together into what we hope will be building some kind of positive black family. That was important to me. That was important to us. Now, the issue becomes that it took a white man to write that. To write that narrative. Could someone like Spike Lee get a film like Django Unchained actually funded by Hollywood to create the same narrative?
Well,
That's the larger issue. One thing I'm enjoying as a black woman, the other I'm looking at the political issues of who it took to create that narrative.
Well, part of what is so deeply problematic here is the fact that the history of slavery in the New World, its development up into the present time, is only being excavated now. It wasn't until 2010 that an atlas of the transatlantic slave trade was published for the first time. Many of the most accredited scholars of slavery in the New World are only beginning to get their books published today, which is part of the reason why it's so preposterous that in the wake of the slaughter that took place in the South at the hands of the white supremacist Dylan Roof, of the 9 folks there gathering, worshiping Christ, is that we should offer forgiveness. The proposal that black people should be forgiving the oppressor, historically or in the present time, is absolute nonsense.
They're forgiven.
And the reason why it's nonsense is because we have not excavated enough of the history to even know where the bodies are buried in the swamp.
They're forgiving him, brought down the Confederate flags, and is beginning to demolish all these symbols in the South of these Confederate killers who should have been tried or executed and hanged. There's a positive aspect to what they did.
There's a positive aspect to it.
All strategies. Martin Luther King, I just did a big book. Big book on, you in there. Muhammad Ali book, where I questioned a lot of people who are in the Nation of Islam. And I said, you guys are non-confrontational. I mean, they'll kill black people, but every time, they threaten whites with violence, they back down. That's why Malcolm was ousted, because Elijah Muhammad believed that Malcolm was bringing heat on the nation for criticizing or making a comment about Kennedy's death. So Elijah Muhammad always, preached that there should be non-confrontation. Now, when he was in prison for 5 years, he didn't start a riot in prison. He learned agricultural technology. That's how they got their farms. So I said, you guys are no different from Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King put his life on the line every day. He was in physical danger. And when I heard that the Army investigated Coretta Scott King, and that the Army was in Memphis the day he was I said, they did it. J. Edgar Hoover and them did it. So, I mean, I think people should use all methods. Martin Luther King wanted the humiliation of the black middle class to cease, and he accomplished that. You know the story that LBJ's valet told him? You know that story. LBJ wanted his valet to take his dogs to Texas. And the black valet said, I have a hard time getting down there myself. And he told him about the lack of accommodations and restrooms and all this kind of stuff. So, I mean, it takes all kinds.
Well, one thing that is continually raised within this conversation thus far is black surrogates of white supremacy.
I was in Martinique, and we were in Martinique for something. I taught down there. The people in Martinique said he should have stayed down here and started a revolt here. He went to Paris. There's a book I read. He had a good time in Paris, too.
Who is that?
France Fanon.
Fanon.
People in Martinique said he should have stayed on down there and started a revolt.
Well, again, something that continues to come up throughout this conversation thus far is the use of black surrogates as agents of white supremacy. And when Kerry Washington was accepting her award from the NAACP, she said that she wanted to congratulate Quentin Tarantino for having the courage to tell our story. Could I get some commentary on that?
They use Viola Davis to back up the help too, which is like the twin.
Well, to what extent does this continue to obscure the excavation of our own history? I mean, as I said, I think that the idea of forgiveness, which is a not so obscure Christian concept that was hoisted upon us, is useless in this day and age. And to what degree is this forgiveness that we're always being urged to make actually part of a white supremacist concept that is being given to us through
stable family in this movie? Black movie makers have done that for 40 years. They just don't get the distribution. I bought a, you can get this for $76. Jet Magazine, they had an ad of black films all the way back to 1916, okay? And as a matter of fact, they had the Precious joke. Remember the last scene of Precious? Where she's
walking by the chickens.
Well, they had Burt Williams.
That was outrageous.
1960 film where he stole.
They had her running down the street with a bucket full of chicken at one point.
Plenty of films with that theme, but sometimes they went too far. They made the black people look too good, too good to be true. but they didn't get the distribution. So this book might be obsolete because Hollywood is collapsing. That's why you can get $5. If you pay $5, you can stay in one of these movie houses all day now. Is that up in Sacramento where you can pay $5 on Tuesday? Because people have other means of viewing films. And now with YouTube doing films, everybody can get their films on there. Now, I was surprised to learn that the second biggest film industry in the world is Nollywood, Nigerian film. They use an expensive technique,
Well,
3/4 inch.
I think it's third because it comes after Bollywood. India
No,
has the
it's
second.
It's second.
Oh, really? Nollywood has?
According to the New York Times, it's second.
Okay.
And they say, well, Hollywood is never going to change. We do our own, but they use inexpensive methods of doing that.
Right.
Now, getting to Halifu's point, you know Berta Mae Grosvenor. We did a film in 1981 starring Berta Mae Grosvenor.
Personal problems.
Dark-skinned leading lady, Walter Cotton,
Right.
late Walter Cotton, directed by Bill Gunn, who was too difficult for Hollywood. They put him out. Shot by Robert Polidori, who's now the official photographer for the New Yorker magazine and was commissioned to do the Palace of Versailles restoration. Okay, we all young then. We don't know. Carmen Moore, great composer, did the music. $40,000, 3/4 inch. Last year it played at Lincoln Center, American Film Institute, because now it's being recognized as a classic. You don't need these big budgets anymore. You know, Burrell, he can do a film with the camera, the work he has.
Yeah.
So the distribution part has been solved, I believe, so that now anybody can get a film done. There are going to be more players, so we don't have to rely on Hollywood. Once again, we need these. My daughter and I in Tennessee, we did an interview with Lou Gossett. Lou Gossett can't get any roles in Hollywood because he's considered too difficult. You go in his house, he got a Grammy, he got an Oscar. He is 86 from Hollywood because he demands too many things. Like The Officer and Gentleman, he took that script over. You know that. He changed that script so that it's not the soldier who beats up the officer, it's the other way around. You know, and that would the soldiers demanded that be done, that be in there, and so they have tried to sabotage his career ever since. So these other guys, Portier, all these people, they have the power to change Hollywood, get away from the campaign trail. The politics should be in Hollywood. They should reform Hollywood. I insist upon that. Danny Glover, I'm sorry to say this, some of his films are like minstrel shows. I'm sorry to say that. I hate to say that.
Don't say it about my buddy.
I hate to say that. I hate to say that. Matter of fact, I wrote about one of them that he was in, which had all collapsed. See, they're leaving.
Don't do that.
He's up there with Bernie Sanders or somebody.
Yeah.
Bernie Sanders ain't got a nickel's chance of winning the Democratic nomination. They should all be in Hollywood, reforming Hollywood. I'm sorry to say that.
I wanted to comment on the, because your original question to me was about trauma and phenomena.
That's right.
And what happened in Charleston in that church and the forgiveness that followed, to me, just shows our sickness.
Right.
You know,
That's
and
exactly right.
I can add on to that. As I was telling my colleagues in the green room, I spent time in South Carolina, in Beaufort, and I wrote a book there, How to Recover from White Supremacy.
Right.
A manual. And when I took the manuscript to Staples to get it copied, the young lady asked me, "Where you from?" I said, "I'm from here." She said, "Oh, no, you're not from here." I said, "Yes, I am." She said, "No, you're not." I said, "Why you say that?" She said, "Because we don't even say that down here. We don't say white supremacy down here. We know it, but we don't say it." So I'm still talking about the level of fear and trauma. And I'll give you my last example. On my last book tour, I went through Beaufort, South Carolina, and my friends told me, "Hey, Marvin, we're not going to help you put on we're not giving you no book party. We're not going to help you promote your book while you're here. We just want you to relax and enjoy yourself and get on out of here." because you Cali Negroes and Northern Negroes come down here talking that shit, you know, about white supremacy, which we don't say, and then you leave, and then we're left with the wrath of the white man. And we got, you know, everybody got 3 minimum wage jobs. You know, you got to have 3 to make it down there in many places. And so you're going to cause some of us to face retaliation.
Right.
And you know the white man knows what families you stand with while you're here. You know that. You know, and it's to the extent that my friend has a newspaper, the Gullah Sentinel, I think it is, in Beaufort. And he says the state of fear is so great that when the people want to deliver some mail to his office, they won't even come in the office. They'll slip it under the door and leave because they don't want to be seen going in that newspaper office because, you know, that's radical. That's radical. And you get retaliation. So I guess I'm talking about the level of this fear that we're still dealing with.
That was Booker T. Washington's criticism of Du Bois, is that he would come down to the South and stir up trouble and go back home.
Right.
I put down Booker T. Washington, but he built an institution that's graduated thousands of people over
That's
the years.
right.
I got to say this though. I spent a minute in South Carolina, and there's a lot of rebellion. I think you missed the rebellion in South Carolina.
I missed it?
Yeah, you missed it. No, it's there. But I wanted to go back on what you were saying. I just had to put that in because I got friends in South Carolina. If I don't say that,
They might see this video.
they're going to get on me on that. I'd say, well, you didn't say nothing. You must agreed with it. But the on the surrogates, going back to the point that you were making on the surrogates, and defending what they're doing. The basketball player Charles Barkley once said,
Idiot.
let me make my point. This is my point. He said, I'm not a role model.
Thank God.
And if I could make my point. And the thing is that a lot of times we can enjoy the work of these actors on the screen, but that doesn't mean that we have to take them to become then they're the spokesman for the race and for the things that are going on. I mean, if anybody is familiar with the acting community, these people are scrambling for roles. Even people like Sam Jackson, who is in every movie that's ever made.
He takes every role that they offer him.
Yeah, but the thing is that actors are at the mercy of the producers, and so you're not going to hear Sam Jackson criticize Quentin Tarantino because he's looking. I mean, that's his bread and butter. So I mean, I think that we have to look at these people and say, look, they are great actors, and I can go and see their movies, but I'm not going to listen to them for my decisions on whether this is right or not, because they're making their money on that. I mean, and I mean the saying is, if somebody's making their money off of something, that's where their mouth is going to be.
Right.
And so that goes back to my point about critical thinking. I think audiences in general have to be critical thinkers. You can't just accept every image that you see. You can't accept the narrative just for what it seems on the surface. We all have to be critical thinkers, dig below the surface, and look at the larger political picture of Hollywood that this book definitely exposes. Every time you go to a film, and I'm not saying you can't enjoy it, but it behooves us, especially in the 21st century with the political situation that we're obviously all in, that we must engage our minds in terms of our consumption. Our consumption of popular culture, our consumption of the news, our consumption of all the images that are coming at us. We must be critical thinkers. We cannot let go of our ability to talk back.
Well, following up specifically in those two terms, Halifu, one of the most fascinating aspects of the essay that you contributed to this book, and I'll read it very briefly and follow up with this question. Scene after scene, Washington beautifully portrays the susceptible strength of nature itself that kept her man dreaming of their reunion. Here it is. Here, too, Tarantino demonstrates the, quote, reality, end quote, of fantasy when, in one scene, she rises from a soft, tranquil river dressed in all yellow, like Oshun, the Yoruba goddess of love. Unconsciously, Tarantino invokes another parallel mythology with African undertones through the meaning of Hildy's character. So, Halifu, what I want to ask you about this, which I consider an extremely important point here that you're making, and that has to do not with Tarantino's unconscious, but rather the role and the presence of African religions retained in the Americas, which is virtually left out or entirely left out of this film, and generally left out of popular culture, except in the most backward and often
Mambo.
Yeah, ways. That's right. So, for all of us, but I'll begin with you, Halifu. How critical is it to understand the retention of African religions when discussing all of these issues that we're talking about?
Well, I think it helps us to develop that critical consciousness that I've been talking about, because first of all, you have to do your homework. You have to know what those religions are, because they're not the past, they are the present.
Right.
Talking about Beaufort County in South Carolina, that is where Oyotunji Village is. Yes. That was a site for initiated priests, Yoruba priests, to come together and form a traditional African village in South Carolina. Talk about resistance. That's right. So it's important for us to do our homework so that we know when we see these images, we can then see that kind of Africanism coming through, even people who don't even know about it. For me, that scene means that Oshun herself inserted her power into that film. Right. You know, he didn't know, I don't think he knew what he was doing, but the color that he had her dressed in and the fact that she came up out of the water. Oshun is the goddess of the rivers. Right. Oshun is the goddess of sweetness and love. And that's what she was representing at that moment. And that was the lure that brought Django through all of that violence and all of that journey.
There it is.
Towards the love that he saw in her.
There it is.
Okay, and it went beyond just the carnal love between man and woman. She was Oshun, rising out of the river. Now, if you don't know that, if you don't know who Oshun is, if you don't know that particular African cosmology, then you're going to go right over that. You're not going to really notice that Oshun herself inserted herself into that film, because I keep saying, I don't think Tarantino knows anything about the Yoruba religion, but there it was, and I saw it, and because I had done my homework, I could write that in the film and say, there she was. Oshun rose out of the river, even in this film. Right.
Ishmael, can you respond to that?
I have a hard time seeing Kerry Washington as Oshun.
Let me frame that differently. The presence of the religions of the African culture.
It's all in popular culture. You just have to, as Halifu said, you have to recognize it. For example, I Love Lucy show. Desi Arnaz was a Cuban.
There you go. And playing for Babaluaye.
Absolutely.
The deity of healing.
Absolutely. Desi Arnaz orchestra.
But he knew what he was doing because he was Cuban.
Of course he did.
Let me say, you know, as far as the African village in South Carolina, when my people told me to shut up and don't say nothing, I went to the African village and hung out with the king. But furthermore, his father, the original king, came out of Harlem, and who was probably responsible for spreading Yoruba mythology and religion in the United States, especially during the Black Arts movement, because the Black Arts movement was influenced by Islam, but as well by Yoruba. Right. And Baraka's play, A Black Mass, is like a combination of Yoruba And Islam, in his story of Yaqub, he, changed the myth a little.
Why did they freeze him in that period? He became a communist in 1974. Whenever I see images of Barack, he's always in his African outfit. I've been to Nigeria. I've never seen anybody wear it, but I mean, they wear it over here. African Americans wear it. Why did they freeze him? In 1974, he denounced black nationalism and became a communist. You know that.
Oh, it was around 72.
74.
But I think if you want me to answer that question,
I want you to answer the question.
there was a convention, the Gary Convention in 1972, where all 10,000 black people came together. And from my understanding and talking with Baraka, he saw that these elected politicians were a joke. And personally, I think it broke his heart and ran him to communism. Because just ironically, when we were at the Black House in 1967 here in San Francisco, Eldridge Cleaver was the communist and Baraka was the spiritual man. And then they flipped.
Eldridge Cleaver was a trickster.
They were all searching for ways. They were all searching for ways to resist, and there were various roads, as there still are today, that individuals can search for what they consider to be the truth about how to liberate themselves.
So we're desperate.
So and at that point, there were young men who were searching, and they went through different doors to their eventual liberation.
Even old men.
But are you talking about black intellectuals are desperate? Because
there was a book called Crisis.
I know.
Harold Cruz.
A crisis of the black intellectual.
Hang on the bridge.
Harold Cruz.
Yes.
But I guess.
I'm sorry.
I want to make a point here. The net income of the white family is $140,000 a year.
Right.
This is Pew Research. The net income of a black family is $12,000. A net income of a Hispanic family is $13,000. Yet those people are optimistic. So is this a crisis of the intellectual again? Or 87% of blacks support Barack Obama. Yet Michael Eric Dyson takes up the whole issue of the New York Times criticizing Barack Obama.
Yeah, that was so sad.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is this just a crisis of a few, black intellectuals who always seem to be in crisis? And does this show that they are divorced from the black masses?
Well, and let me just, I wanted to go back on the issue of Africanisms in our religious beliefs. One of our problems is we have not gone back and separated American Christianity before we got here. And it's impossible for us to look at how much we've influenced and how much Africanisms are present now in American Christianity, unless you go back and see what Christianity was before we got here. So there's a lot of the images, the Orishas, you see that throughout the South. They're hidden. We all know the story that they're very easy to see in Catholicism. But in Protestantism, it's more difficult because they had to hide in plain sight. And so that's one of the studies that need to be done.
Catherine Dunham did it. Catherine Dunham did that study.
Catherine Dunham.
Yeah, but I think that
as well.
He found similarities between Haitian religion and black Christianity.
Yeah, but he's talking about Protestantism, and from my research, the Africanisms in Protestantism came out in the methodology of worship, the methodology of spirit possession transformed into getting the Holy Ghost, for example.
And we don't see that as being African.
Well, the Europeans were not necessarily worshiping like that when they came here.
No,
to
I understand
the
that. But when I say we collectively, is that's not identified as being African.
Sure.
Because we haven't done our homework.
A lot of people have done that. The early black church had, for example, the ring dance.
But you mean part of a collective education?
I understand that the information is there, but when I say we, I'm talking about the collective we, because if you go in certain circles, all of this information is available. And my point is that we need to, we collectively need to look at that work that's already been done.
That's under Protestantism. Catholics.
Yeah,
Catholics
it's different. It's different in Catholicism.
They didn't care if you continued Yoruba and Cuba and Puerto Rican places like that, as long as you went to mass.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, Santeria is taking such a grip in New York City that they've eliminated this requirement that you be Catholic, because Jewish people are stockholders, hedge fund people are putting out little things that with cigars and rum on Monday morning.
Whatever works to make the money.
So the Catholics have made the Catholics have made a provision for a Yoruba deity in their masses in New York. So they're flexible. Depends upon the Pope. Some popes are conservative.
Well, part of the
Protestants thing is like, when you come up against African religion in the United States, you get the Salem witch trial, stuff like that.
That's right.
That woman was from the Caribbean.
That's right. Part of the reason why I mentioned that, other than the beauty of your insight, Halifu, in your essay, is that when we look at the thought of Malcolm X just at the period where he was assassinated, in those 4 months where he was traveling throughout Europe and across the African continent, and we compare that with where Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, where he was just before his assassination, one of the parallels, or where they coalesce, is the belief that an international identity for blacks in America was necessary in order to elevate the struggle from civil rights to human rights. That the only way to determine that we would find our own destiny and not be reliant upon whites in America in order to seek that destiny would be to internationalize our identity. And it seems to me that the role of religion from Africa, retained in American popular culture and throughout the Americas, is really the key in deciphering that very parable and deciphering that very problem.
The people who were in the Nation of Islam said Malcolm X knew that they were white Muslims before he left this country, because he went to the United Nations every week, so he knew they were white Muslims. And he knew the old man had wives, quote Marx, before that exposure. So they are very cynical about his reasons for leaving the Nation of Islam. So they went over there, Muhammad Ali. They said this is a paradise religion, it's brotherhood. I interviewed 3 of Africa's top writers, Bola Shenka, Nuruddin Farah, and Chinweizu. They said Islam is bad news. It's a racist religion in Africa. It's a extraterritorial religion, an invader's religion, and they treat black people as subhuman.
Well, my friends, including some members of the Last Poets, made their Hajj to Mecca, and they were forced to ride in the back of the bus from Amman, Jordan to Mecca. Yeah, by Turkish Muslims.
Well, getting to your point that you were raising about this internationalism, I think that many of our intellectuals have always tried to promote a Pan-Africanism among blacks in North America, to begin to make connections and see our relationships not only in terms of oppression, but in terms of culture, to our Caribbean cousins and our and people on the African continent. Du Bois, in his Pan-African congresses, starting at the beginning of the 20th century, was a leader in that. But not all of them who believed in Pan-Africanism were coming from that religious place, from that cosmological connection, because many of them had already as intellectuals, had bought into Western intellectualism, and were not they were not necessarily involved with the religion itself. So I think Pan-Africanism has oftentimes been separated from that understanding of African cosmology. Although some have joined them together, many of them were more involved with Western intellectualism in terms of the political and economic relationships between Africa, the Caribbean and North America.
Yeah. You mentioned Michael Eric Dyson. Very quickly, I wanted to say, Dyson said one of the most ridiculous things that I've heard all year, and it's been a year of doozies, let me tell you. But just this last May at the Oakland Book Festival, Mike Dyson got up there on a panel on the legacy of Malcolm X, and he said that Beyonce was the most contemporary iteration.
That's professors
Malcolm
trying
X.
to be down. That's professors trying to be hip.
I'm not jiving. Johnnie Burrell recorded it. You can see it on YouTube. I said, what?
And I asked Ishmael Reed a question.
That's not even worth.
Okay.
That's not even worth. That's not even worth answering.
But please,
You better be careful. You better be careful with the question because I'm your publisher.
No. But I just wanted to know your views on Hamilton.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
We'd be here all night.
Just
Well,
briefly.
The popular Broadway musical.
These people
Yeah.
up in Toronto seem to be very hip. And,
oh, they're up on it.
Caribbean people I met up there, they
Yeah.
got their own newspapers, radio broadcasts, television
Yeah.
stations and everything. Hamilton is coming to Toronto, and they're going to picket it up there. I'm sure. I'll write a piece about it. This guy, Lynn Miranda, is guilty of consumer fraud. If you want to read my piece about Hamilton, this fraud, go to counterpunch.org, and it's in there. Yeah, here's this thing is making $500,000 a week, and black middle class people love that stuff, man. They go there. I know people in my family. They go there and love it. His premise is that Hamilton was a abolitionist and a progressive. That's what's making all the money. Poor people can't afford the tickets. I think they're up to $839 now. Something like that. It's like a Warriors basketball game or something. So I similar research, and I was the first one to put it out there, that Hamilton owned slaves. And actually found his expense book where he paid money, $250. Gee, I wish I could pay. Anyway, I used a couple of slaves in my house. $250, right, for these slaves, and identified the slaves. Okay, and married up. He married into a slave-holding family, Schuyler's, and he negotiated slave trades on their behalf. All right. Then I went to the Continental Congress, where Hamilton passed a resolution accusing the British of stealing slaves from their owners. Now, what kind of abolition is that? So people say, well, he did belong to an abolitionist society. Well, all of them were hypocrites.
Right.
Thomas Jefferson wanted to put in the Declaration of Independence a line criticizing the British for owning slaves.
Right.
I mean, he was a slave owner, right? So that was even too much for the other slaveholders. So they deleted that. So this guy, this is a fraud. He got it from one of these groupie official historians, one of these establishment historians, Chernow.
Yeah, worse than John Meacham.
Well, Meacham said that Andrew Jackson was a rock and roll
Yeah,
star.
he's another one of those guys.
But anyway, even in that book on Hamilton by Chernow, which he said he got the information from, he says that Hamilton may have owned slaves. The guy was a slave trader. His mother was a slave trader, okay? He was against the British kidnapping slaves from their owners, quote marks, okay? So this is a complete fraud. And the Rockefeller Foundation, this is how these lies circulate. The Rockefeller Foundation paid for thousands of blacks and Latino students to go see this thing. Now, he's been ducking because my criticism, although I'm dismissed as a crank around here, okay,
Yes, sir.
has reached the Atlantic Monthly, has reached some of the mainstream magazines, and now it's ignited a whole discussion by other people, and we have given an award. I can say this right now. Now that women and blacks are entering the profession, American Association of Historians and all that, the women were the ones who exposed him.
That's right.
That's a slave trader.
That's
so we're
right.
giving those two women awards. One's a Latino. So this is a fraud. And I always think about what George Bernard Shaw said. George Bernard Shaw said that if you do not tell your stories, others will tell them for you,
That's
and they
right.
will vulgarize and degrade you.
That's right.
And that's the whole thing in this book.
Yeah, I should mention.
And incidentally, the most devastating essay about Precious ever printed, written by a so-called white woman, is in this book. The most devastating criticism of the worst film ever made about black life. Precious. Even had the chicken stealing scene in there, right? Makes D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation like aggressive. Matter of fact, I said that D.W. Griffith had whites play the roles of blacks because he didn't want to embarrass blacks. You know, in comparison to this thing, Precious. And I followed the marketing plan. Everybody don't look at the marketing plan. And I'll shut up. They say we cannot sell this to black people. This thing, they admitted it. They said this thing is so terrible. Incest, all those old stereotypes from, even the Confederacy didn't do that.
That's right.
I mean, even the Nazis didn't accuse the minorities of that. So he said, we cannot sell this because it's offensive to blacks. We tried to sell Miracle at St. Anna, about the Italian campaign, where black soldiers were sent to the front without ammunition sometimes. They were massacred over there, okay? And they were commanded by Southern officers, because they said the Southern officers knew how to handle niggas, okay? And so Spike Lee, to his everlasting credit, made that film. It was only available at 10:30 at night in Oakland, okay? So they said, we can't sell that. Great debaters. You would know this is about one of the great poets in African American literature.
That's right. Never
Melvin Tolson. Not even mentioned.
Right.
Denzel Washington plays that role.
Yes.
Here's a black school besting Harvard. You know Lorraine Hansberry. Lorraine Hansberry said Broadway producers are scared of cerebral black people. So they said, we can't sell this. How are we going to sell this? They brought Oprah Winfrey and Tyler Perry on to front this thing. And that's when the distributor said, we can sell this. Because we got two black people up there fronting this thing. Oprah Winfrey and Tyler Perry, who's behind Precious, gave $1 million to the NAACP. And they gave Precious an award.
Lee Daniels.
Yeah, so if you notice, Hollywood did not recognize them as producers because they came on after the final cut, after the movie was made, okay? So, I mean, that's what you're up against. So this writer, she's dead, one of these old-fashioned tough New York intellectuals wrote this. She's dead. And we got someone to help in here. That was another head pay. The help.
We should mention this book is for sale here today.
Today is for sale out there.
As well as works by Marvin X and Halifu Osumare. So
no. What about Precious?
You want to open up?
Precious. I mean, the help. She took these people's stories and made millions. She has made more money off the black boogeyman genre than all the people who write that. As a matter of fact, they mad.
Well, now Catherine
because they thought the thing
was
was going forever. Now they're in trouble with the IRS. Yeah. She done put them out of business. Okay. The hell.
Cashing the checks.
The hell. She took this Maid story, and Maid only got $75,000 when she sued her. This is a white guy wrote it. He directed it. Takes place during the murder of Medgar Evers. The white guys in the movie are helping people cross the street, and one of them helping a black woman with her groceries. They don't belong to the Klan. They don't belong to the White Citizens Council, anything like that. The villain in the movie is a guy named Leroy. Now he don't even impress, at least the guy that makes an appearance.
His torso.
We hear about him on the phone.
Just his torso floating in space.
Right.
Remember that? Would you like to open this up to some questions from the audience?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. So my colleague here, Katrina, is going to walk the mic. I'm sure there's some questions that folks might like to bring to the panel.
Can I say something first?
Don't ask me any smart
I
questions.
just want to acknowledge the transition of one of our great writers, Austin Clarke, from Toronto,
I was there
Canada.
I was there the day he died.
Yes.
Great guy.
And I was happy this morning even to get a card from Nikki Giovanni, who thanked me for letting her know
He's a great guy.
that he was called, when I was there in '67 as the draft dodger, he was Canada's angriest Negro.
Well, they need some more of them.
But we just want to praise the brother.
Hello, thanks Doug for inviting me. It's Mira. I've been reading a little bit about Orange is the New Black and how it makes money off of the tragedy of black people and that there are no black writers on that show. If there were black writers on that show, how would the storyline change? What would we see that we're not seeing now?
Orange is the new black.
I haven't seen it.
Who knows about that show?
To be honest, I haven't seen it, and the reason I haven't seen it is I stopped with the title, because when you start saying that, okay, being black is somewhere in the past, this is not the flavor of the month. Now we've got this new flavor. It sort of lost me, so I probably should look at it and see, and we can talk, and I can certainly answer that question. But no, I mean, at this point, there are so many things like that saying that, well, it's sort of the post racism or whatever the post is now, and the idea being that, yeah, well, I missed the part where being black was what was the thing you were supposed to be. Somehow it passed me by. So now we're past that. So that's what turned me off from it.
So I think you have a group of panelists who don't watch a lot of the cable television.
Well, no,
License of the Black Intellectual.
I don't even have a TV.
But yeah, so I couldn't make a comment about it either because I haven't really seen the series. I've seen a few like clips or trailers, but that's all.
But I mentioned in my essay about black writers and why don't we have more stories of resistance? Why? Why haven't we done the movie on Toussaint?
Right.
Or Nat Turner, or Gabriel Prosser, or Denmark Vesey?
Well, we have Nat Turner about to come out in the fall, I think, but Nate Parker is doing The Birth of a Nation. So,
Tarzan's coming out, and now they've turned Tarzan into a resistor against Belgian
Imperialism.
I mean, and I read the Tarzan books when I was coming up, and I missed that. I missed that part altogether.
I think Southerners have a lot of influence over the box office. And Southern, that's why we get all these Confederate movies like Shane, where the hero is a Confederate soldier and Gone with the Wind.
The Searchers.
So the Southerners, that's why Hattie McDaniel, who took over the script, that script, Gone with the Wind, called for a passive, shuffling maid. She took that thing from Daryl Zanuck and was the most powerful, character in the movie. She couldn't attend opening of Gone with the Wind in Atlanta because the Southerners still have a veto over what Hollywood does.